What's going on, everyone? My name is Nicholas Merton here at DataDash, and today is March 11th of 2018. Well, folks, it's time for a project review here on the DataDash channel, and today I'm going to be spending some time to talk about a project that many of you out there in the DataDash community have requested I cover over the past few weeks, and it is no other than Ontology. So many of you might have seen the successful launch that it had on Binance recently. I know many of you out there are active fans in the Neo community, and you know that Ontology is tied towards the ecosystem, and many of you out there have been curious as to what it means by wanting to build a trust platform. So I'm going to be diving into all the major details into Ontology to give you all a good brief understanding of the project. However, I want to keep clear on a few things, guys. First and foremost, if you guys like what you see in the video and you want to get some more details, feel free to go down into the description and learn more. I'll have a ton of resources for you guys there down below. Along with that as well, guys, I haven't made any serious investments in Ontology yet. I'm waiting for the price to go down, and along with that as well, I haven't received any compensation. This is not financial advice, and you guys gotta go do your own research. So anyways, that's it, guys. Let's go ahead and dive into Ontology and learn a little bit more about what they mean by trying to build a trust-based platform. So let's talk about the core concept of trust. Trust is a very valuable asset in this world. If you can have trust with your friends or be an establishment that can incentivize a trusted relationship between you and another partner, or in the case of technology, building a reputation with technology, a trust in that technology is very important. Well, what we just stated were the three major forms of trust that are available. First and foremost, let's take a look at trust in technology here. This is something I think that many of us find is the easiest thing to trust. For example, Google search. I have a trust that when I use Google search, I'm going to get the best results for what I'm looking for when I use the search engine. Healthcare devices, for example. Many insurance companies nowadays for healthcare insurance are actually working towards using medical devices such as Apple Watch or Fitbit to track health information and find ways how they can provide better insurance policies for those who can keep transparent about that information by using wearable devices. And last but not least, blockchain is also a great example. Going back to the most bare-bone case of blockchain, we can take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin, we know from its history, we can have a trust in the network and the transactions on the network and making transactions because we know of its history of immutability and censorship resistance. And we can go back and look at transactions back from 2009, 2010, and 2011, years ago from where we are now. So we have a trust that Bitcoin is a highly secure network, and the technology of blockchain is what secures and utilizes that as well as its proof of work. Let's go ahead and talk about the next level here, trust in legal systems. So for example, we might have a trust in certain governments, certain courts that enforce specific laws under given nations or different territories. And we also have consumer protection laws, laws that help us as consumers when we make decisions to where we can have trustworthy protection when we buy certain products or services. Last but not least, we have trust through communities. So this could be trust through our friends, our families, our peers, and our classes. Along with that as well, different communities, religious groups, all kinds of different community groups of individuals that come together for a common cause or a common connection between one another. And the trust that goes between those networks are very vital and important. So obviously, trust is a very valuable asset in this world, and it's in so many different things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. However, the problem with trust in the modern day world is even though many of the a lot of the technological infrastructure for a variety of different industries and different communication patterns have increased, the problem is that there's a lack of transparency in this world and a way to really build solidified trust. And in this world, it really can only go so far. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's take a look at some of the major flaws here, guys. First and foremost, in the sense of trust, we have to trust institutions, centralized institutions, and very little in this world, usually companies that hold large amounts of data, to own our own personal data. And it turns out, and even in this modern world where we have our own personal devices and all these things that track information, we have a lack of ownership over our personal data. And to many, this could be a serious issue. One, we might not know how much capitalization is coming off our information, not to mention to be able to build a digital identity and to maintain it and own it at the same time is very important. Along with that as well, multiple hands exchange information on a daily basis. In order to build trust and to send transparent information over specific networks, we don't really have a one-size-fits-all approach to this. And in fact, it can be distributed between multiple parties and leave your information susceptible between all the different parties that it's bouncing between. So, for example, vital things such as your social security and all kinds of things that might identify you as an individual could be compromised going through multiple networks. So we need something that can shorten that process. Next up, single data points don't serve as great ways to identify an individual. So for example, this is an analogy that I like to use and I think would be relatable to many of a younger audience in this world. For many of you who might be going to university and might not be of the age of 21, well, when you go to a bar or to a club that might require that you be 21, you might have a fake ID that looks like you, but it might not be you, and it might have wrong information, but in many cases, you can waddle right in. Now, I can tell you guys, I haven't engaged in that myself, but I knew many college students who did. So because of that, we can see that having one point of identification can be not the best in regards to business and enterprise, different transfers of trust and value between one another. So because of that, we need multiple sides of identification to prove identity for an individual. Next up, identity verification is fragmented, and because of that, it becomes quite tedious and expensive. It can be time-consuming, it can be impractical for different networks of enterprise and communities to make transactions of data between one another to solidify trust between one another. And because of that, like I said, it's very, very impractical for this day and age. And last but not least, identifying false information. It's very difficult. I don't think obviously there's not too much explanation that needs to be there, but not being able to verify whether information is trustworthy or if it's false is a very, very vital flaw in today's world. So, lots of misinformation. This could be used, for example, in the case of maybe a poll, for example, that supposedly has data collected from users, and solidifying whether or not this is trustworthy information or falsified information. So, we already know that not only is there a lot of core problems with trust in the modern day world, there's a lot of things that could be fixed if we could find a one-size-fits-all solution. But along with that as well, there's some major headlines out there. We all are pretty much aware of the Equifax hack and how one centralized institution lost and, well, not so much lost, but gave up an open gateway unknowingly to an outside actor who stole over 143 million records of personal information from individuals like you and I. And this is not just, things that we probably were on a day-to-day basis, maybe like our search history or, something tedious like that that usually isn't a vital threat to us if outside actors obtain it. A serious thing that outside actors could use is what they got through the Equifax hack. Our full names, our address, our birthday, our social security number, our credit card information, things like that that can damage our financial reputation as well as being utilized for other services overall that match with our identity. So, we already know that the Equifax hack left a huge dent in the company as well as people's trust in these centralized institutions managing information and identity and making sure that outside actors can't use or misuse that information. Sadly, in this world, they can and they already have started using it. So, along with that as well, we also have the rise of medical identity theft. This has been a big issue in regards to people utilizing other people's IDs or impersonating other people in order to pick up consumer drugs or other prescription medication that is rightfully for you or another party, but someone else is stealing and utilizing it. And this can be really bad because many people have abused this in the case of opioids and drugs that really we don't want people getting attained if they aren't, supposed to be having it. They shouldn't be attaining that drug, especially if it's yours as an individual. So, these are just a few cases here, guys. So we already see that there's a lot of issues. But how are we going to fix this system that is flawed? How can we do this within something that maybe could utilize blockchain technology? Well, this is what Ontology is aiming to do. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read through a description here. This is one of the peak descriptions that you find inside of the Ontology white paper, which again, I'll have a link down below. But then we're going to break this down and really get towards a more kind of legible, I don't know if that's a proper word, a more readable description of how Ontology works. So let's go ahead and read through this here. So, Ontology has architected a distributed trust system. It incorporates multiple trust systems and an integrated protocol system with various blockchains and databases. Multi-source identities and multi-source data exchange protocols have been implemented into the network, building a distributed trust system that is cross-chain, cross-identity, cross-system, cross-application, and cross-device. Ontology aims to develop its trust system through partnerships to provide distributed services, including distributed communities, data verification, data exchange, and credit across industries. That's a mouthful. So I thought I would go ahead and describe Ontology in a little bit more of a brief summary. It's not exactly that much shrunken. However, I broke it up into some central points that really give a good description as to what Ontology is. So, first and foremost, Ontology is creating an ecosystem of private blockchains to exchange data for verification, reputation, collaboration, and much more different services. So right there, we already have a few major use cases: verifying identity, identifying your reputation as an individual. If a company needs to know about your financial history and you want to get access to a certain loan or some kind of financial service, there's a way you can display your reputation. Along with that as well, collaboration as well, and so many other use cases as we'll dive into later. So this is going to be an ecosystem of private blockchains communicating with one another, being able to store private information, but also at the same time being able to make that information readily available for other communities, enterprises, and individuals. Along with that as well, it offers a system that allows separate chains, industries, systems, applications, and devices to communicate. So this is not just some kind of bare bones network of blockchains being to communicate. This allows industries of all types to communicate with one another. So maybe, for example, as we were talking about financial companies working alongside healthcare companies as well, working with different cross sections, and maybe being able to contact government organizations to confirm identity, and all of these other important factors across different systems, applications, and devices, from computers to mobile devices. Along with that as well, the implementation is simple, convenient, and accessible to anyone. And the reason this is because it's a very modular blockchain. People can not only create their own private chains inside of the Ontology ecosystem, but along with that as well, they're very plug-in style. They're very pluggable in the sense where you don't need to have prior experience developing on decentralized or distributed networks. So because of this, it's very easy for people to onboard through APIs and to utilize the SDK to develop and be a part of the Ontology network. So again, there's an incentive here. We'll learn later on as to why everyone would want to participate, but it makes things very streamlined. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the kind of infrastructure of Ontology. This is very important to understand the different layers of Ontology to understand how its framework works. Now, if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty details, again, guys, go check out the white paper, and the technical white paper gets into a lot more details here. But I came up not only with the titles they have here, but also kind of a general title to come along with each layer. So first off, we have the different scenarios. So we can come up here and see some of the use cases for Ontology: verification of people, a reputation evaluation, community management, verification of objects, financial services, all types of different things that we can do on top of Ontology. And I use this as what I call the service layer. So there's all these different use cases and services that can be offered on top of Ontology. Next, along with that, we have the people, wealth, things, and organizations layer, or the data layer. So this is where we're going to be able to see all types of different data on individuals, on the specific wealth of individuals, things, and organizations. This is the substance of, Ontology as a project. As I guess that'd be probably the best way to put it. It's something of substance that we can gain and utilize for different types of services. So in the case of identity, for example, if I need to verify the identity of another party for a service I'm offering, I can go ahead and do that on Ontology. Along with that as well, we have the applications layer. So this is where all the applications and interfaces will utilize the data on the Ontology network. So this is where people will be able to have custom applications of all different types to, again, make the Ontology network as useful as possible. Along with that, we have the modules and protocols layer. So this is going to include the variety of protocols. I'm not going to go too in-depth with the protocols in Ontology in this video, but you can go through the white paper and figure out a little bit more about that. But also the modules as well, on how people we'll be able to, again, use that plugin style of communicating and utilizing the Ontology network, as well as the SDK to develop on top of, as well as connecting with APIs. So being able to transmit information in regards to the APIs. So really interesting stuff. And after that, we go down here, we can see how this is cross-chain in the sense where it can communicate with different private blockchains with one another. So this is the last layer right here, the Ontology network chains, where it's a cross-chain it's cross-chain in the sense that it can communicate with other chains on the network. So we have all these different layers here in a very simplified format, but you can see how powerful it is in the sense of ease of use, the amount of services it can offer, as well as its modularity and convenience for enterprise to adopt and utilize Ontology. So what are some of the things we can do here? Well, if you go through the white paper, guys, it's really something I recommend. If you have the time, go through and see all of the use cases for it. It's crazy, and they have some wonderful diagrams like we have here. These are all stripped right out of the white paper here, but we're going to go ahead and dive through two of the major use cases. So we've been talking a lot about establishing identity for trust. It's very important to identify things to build trust in them and to have information tied to them. So for example, before we even talk about identifying people, we can identify objects. So let's say, for example, the object we're identifying here is 10 tons of coal. Let's say we're a coal company, for example, and we mined over 10 tons of coal. It's a lot of coal. But we want to go ahead and distribute this, give it an identity of some sort for the object, these 10 tons of coal. So for example, we have tangible characteristics. Where is it located? Where did we extract this coal? The date it was extracted, the properties tied to it, what quality of coal is it? So we can be transparent on as technology, as well as the relationship with money. So maybe, for example, kind of bouncing out of coal here, let's say we had a house, a property of some sort, or some kind of asset where there can be a specific price or a rent for that different type of asset. Along with that, the relationship with people. Our company, we want to mark that we have ownership over this, the rights to use it, who, for example, where we may be selling it to, for example. We can mark that in there as well. Along with that as well, relationship with other goods. So, for example, in the case of a house, maybe, for example, we have another financial service like a mortgage payment, for example, or maybe a mortgage that we have with a client that's tied towards this home. So again, you can utilize this for so many different types of assets. That's the whole idea, different objects that can be identified on Ontology and have all of these what I would say is multi-layered data for that individual object. So again, building more transparency, building more trust, and being able to send communication over the Ontology network. So next up, we have ownership of your own data. This is very important, being able to build a collection of data for yourself. So through the Ontology network, with all of these different communities, governments, and enterprise companies coming onto Ontology, there's a large network of information and data. And with that, you can start to establish large sets of data. So for example, what skills do you offer? What unique characteristics do you have? What are you experienced in? So many different factors in an individual to where you can actually start to have ownership of your own information. This is extremely vital, and it's something that, in this day and age where we want not only a sense of transparency, but a sense of ownership in regards to our own personal information. It's very empowering. So, interesting stuff. I'd like to see, kind of this in practice so we can really understand just how important it is. I can think in a theoretical sense how important it would be, but again, to see Ontology, if it does take off over the long term, how powerful it'll be to finally own your own data rather than having it always in the hands of other individuals or enterprise companies. So next up, let's go ahead and take a look of an example of a distributed collaborative system in medicine for Ontology. How would Ontology help to secure something, for example, in the case of an individual getting prescriptions? Well, I want to go ahead and explain this diagram here. So we're going to start off here on the left-hand side. Let's say, for example, that we have a doctor and a hospital down here who have registered on the Ontology network, and they've built IDs for themselves with information and transparency. So they've built unique IDs for each party here. So let's go ahead and start off the process of a prescription drug or getting a prescription drug. So let's say this is me over here. I'm the patient over here, and I'm going to my doctor of choice where I want to go about doing my yearly checkup, for example. And the doctor says, "Oh, Nick, I don't know, Nick, this is bad news. You have really high cholesterol because you've been eating way too many eggs." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my diet." So, and well, in my case, I'd probably go out and change my diet if that was the case. However, in many cases, a doctor would want to prescribe you a cholesterol medication. So, what he's going to do is not only send you an electronic prescription and medical history, he's also going to send his credentials to the pharmacy. And we'll learn about why that's important in a second. So as we go over here, the patient would come over to purchase the medicine. He's going to his pharmacy after the 1 or 2 days that's needed between the transfer of information to go pick up his prescription. And he's going to go over to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy says, "Okay, let me go ahead and check to see if you can purchase this." So they're not only going to just take the doctor's credentials. They're not going to take a signature like that. What they're going to do is actually go to the Ontology network as well as check with the hospital. So they're going to check the hospital's credential where the doctor is tied to, as well as the doctor's individual credentials. And he can do and the pharmacy can do this by going onto the Ontology network and checking for the identification system. So again, locking in transparency of data and information, unique ID, in order to verify that the doctor and the hospital are who they say they are and that they can give the prescription to the individual. So from there on out, they verify it and send it off to the individual, the patient who needs the prescription medication. So this is just one example. Again, if you guys want to see more use cases, go through the white paper and see it for yourself, guys. It's really incredible to see just how much flexibility they offer in the sense of building identity on the Ontology network and how it can be utilized in so many different practical situations. So what are some of the different services that could be offered on top of Ontology? Well, again, I don't want to say that all of these will be exactly practical. These are some that are found on the white paper. However, there is some serious use cases here for Ontology because when you identify systems, there's a lot of interesting things you can do once you have a framework that solidifies all that identity. For example, for finance, you could do it for ownership of securities and wealth management. You could build the details of, for example, a certain amount of shares in stock or an asset, like a property, for example. Who owns it? How long have they owned it? Etc. All kinds of different data points to play with here. Internet of Things. This is where there could be some massive improvement with identity for security reasons. Who can access this information? Along with that as well, smart home management, office management, so many cool things tied to Internet of Things. We also have consumers for the sharing economy. So for example, let's say that I had a car that has technology in it that could connect, for example, with the Ontology, or it could connect with the identification system. Let's say I had a car, for example, where I wanted to share it with 3 members of my family when I'm not using it. Well, they could use Ontology to verify their identification system to access my car. So we could utilize it for systems in the sharing economy. And this is going to be larger and larger over time, as well as what we were talking about earlier, pharmaceutical tracking, agriculture food authentication in the case of verifying where something's been over time. For example, we talked about location with different products. And obviously you have things in the payments such as KYC and anti-money laundering, huge fields to tackle, insurance as well, in media in the sense of digital rights management. So to verify who has ownership over some unique intellectual property on Ontology. Note as well, we have even more here, guys. Asset titles, software development, medical records, governments in the sense of voting and vehicle registration. I mean, there's just so many different things that require a heavy level of trust, and Ontology could be used for these things. Now, again, we have to be critical here, guys. Ontology is still very early on, and we'll have to see if it can deliver on these things. But the potential of this and why it's so important, these identity systems are so important to have an ecosystem that you can transfer that information between different parties in a very trustworthy and convenient way, is why Ontology stands out in this case. So looking a little bit outside of the tech and the project here, guys, I really want to influence, or not in the sense of really emphasize how stacked the team is, okay? Now, I'm not going to dive through each individual here. There's over 40 team members on Ontology, but they not only have really close ties to Neo, as we talked about before, and we'll spend some time talking about in just a minute, but along with that as well, Jun Lee, who is the founder of Ontology, is in direct tie with Dao Hongfei, who's the founder of NEO. Not to mention, if you go through, you can click on each individual's name on the website, and you can see that so many of them have worked for leading companies in China in the industries of fintech, security, and cryptography, all types of very important factors that need to be foundations for ontology. So again, I think they've got a really solid team. Again, I don't want to spend too much time looking at individual profiles. There's a lot of interviews though with Jun Li, and I'll leave some great resources with interviews of him as well as other points on the team down below. So many people out there have a big misconception as well. Many people have been saying that is Ontology a competitor with NEO, or is it a competitor with other parts of the ecosystem, such as the key, for example, and the sense of identity? And folks, no, it is not. In fact, Ontology is just simply a part of the NEO ecosystem. Remember, Dao Hongfei has direct ties with Jun Li, the guy who's the founder of Ontology. And because of that, they're cooperating together to build an entire ecosystem surrounding NEO, which is again, where digital assets are going, the digital asset economy is going to be built, the smart economy, where Ontology is going to be almost an identification layer. It's to solidify data and information and build a trust layer for the NEO ecosystem. So again, they're all serving as major components: NEO, Ontology, and on-chain. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Ontology itself and the actual token behind the Ontology network. So first off, there is a supply. It's a little bit different than NEO in this regard. This is probably the biggest difference in the sense of supply. There's over 1 billion Ontology that are out there, and whereas NEO has 100 million. And as well as that, just like NEO, it generates gas. So the symbol for this is ONG. It's Ontology gas, of course. So if you generate, if you hold your Ontology tokens, you end up earning Ontology gas in the long run. So just like NEO, for example, if you stake your NEO. So along with that as well, we have a distribution here. So if you guys want to know how they were distributed, they actually didn't really do an official ICO. So again, this is distributed in probably a different fashion than most other projects. Some of them were given out to NEO holders, some of them were given to the NEO Council, some of them were given to the founders of the team, as well as those who have attended certain events through airdrops that they've conducted. So guys, I want to hear down below, what do you guys think about Ontology? Again, I couldn't talk about everything in this video, guys. It would take way too long for me to do that. However, again, I've got the resources down below if you guys need them for any further questions, comments, or concerns. But again, I'm very interested in Ontology and other identification systems that utilize blockchain. This is a really interesting system, so I'm interested to see how it's going to take off over the long term, and we'll have to see if it can adapt with the NEO ecosystem over time. I think it'll do quite well, but we'll have to see if the entire ecosystem itself can sustain itself as well as gain adoption over time. Well, anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, we've got all the information down below in the description. All right, guys, well, take care. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay tuned.